Daphne, can you do sound check again? Daphne? That's on her end.
Melissa and Laura are also on.
Laura? Melissa, can you do the sound check real quick?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
We can turn off public comments too on the live stream. That would probably be on their end, not our end. So
yeah.
Okay, I think we're ready. I just I will record on my end.
Yeah. Can you just check with someone at home, see if it's streaming or not, or someone who's watching?
It is streaming?
Yeah, were you watching the public one?
We're on? Okay. I think we're good, Melissa.
Okay. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the West Northfield School District 31 Board of Education. Roll call. Here.
Stephanie Frey.
Here. Here.
Maria Bethel, Nancy Hammer. Here. Jesse Loria. Here. Aaron Murphy. Here.
Okay. Any additions or changes to the agenda?
The only thing is the enrollment report I actually put in my presentation. So we don't have to do it twice. You're just going to do it with the presentation.
Okay. And visitors requesting to address the board.
I apologize. I'm going to interrupt. It is not currently working. Can you send out that new link? I apologize.
Send out this new link?
Yes. Yeah. No scratch.
When you get this link, can you get it on the website too? Yeah. Okay, so the text and email have been sent with the new link. I'm going to start timing myself.
Okay. We are good. We have 14 people watching, and it's increasing. So,
okay, so we're good?
Yeah, I think we're good to go with the new link. I don't know if you want to give it a couple of minutes, but
Are we good?
I think we're good.
Okay, great. So, recognition of the audience.
Oh, we should probably just go back and redo this so people can hear it.
Oh, okay, no problem. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the West Northfield School District Board of Education. Roll call.
Laura Greenberg,
Here.
Jacqueline Frank,
Here.
Robert Reese,
Here.
Jeffrey Sears.
Here.
Here.
Nancy Manner.
Here.
Here.
Okay, any additions or changes to the agenda?
Only for me that the enrollment report is now included in my presentation about the opening of school, so we don't need to do it twice.
And Melissa and Aaron, I'd like to see if you could apply for an update on board self-evaluation.
Okay.
Okay.
And then, recognition of the audience.
Yes, I have 4 public comments. The first one is from AJ and Taz Verani, which says transitions between remote sessions are in need of some help, particularly for the young ones. While we're waiting for the much anticipated breakout feature to be added to Google Meet, which is under development, we should consider having instructors jump in and out of meetings rather than the students. As parents of 2nd and 3rd graders, we are constantly scrambling to find meeting invites and passwords and adhering to overall schedule. Let's eliminate all the virtual noise for students and allow them to focus on learning. The other thing I would love to see, have an assistant moderator in all virtual classes. Ideally, this person would spend the entire school day with our students, minus lunch and recess. They would be responsible to answer the plethora of questions our students have, keep things moving to schedule, ensure the completion of any assignments, activities, videos, engage students during the gaps where the students don't have face time with the lead instructors, and also potentially provide tech support. Thanks for your time and dedication to our district. Next one from Halima and Henri Coppin. Hello, we are beyond grateful that the school is offering both safe in-person and rich e-learning opportunity for our community. Just wanted to share some comments based on the first 2 days of e-learning for Winkleman Elementary students, 3rd grade in particular. The homeroom teachers are dealing with a lot of pressure right now, but are ultimately doing a much better job of engaging students compared to the spring e-learning process. There is great improvement despite some technical issues, which will hopefully be figured out within the next couple of weeks. Unfortunately, sessions for special classes, PE and music in particular, are disengaging at the moment. These co-curricular activities are meant to enrich and give students a break between academics. They can be presented in a much more creative way than with a list of instructions of sit-ups and push-ups and pre-recorded videos for all grade levels at the same time. We understand that there are resource issues and instructors for these activities may not be available for full synchronized sessions, but even the pre-recorded videos can be more informative, creative, and interesting. Ultimately, students need to be engaged, otherwise they aren't learning. Also, these co-curricular sessions take place in the morning. After attendance, SEL seems to distract the students from focusing on their academics. Could you please consider revising the schedule to move co-curricular activities to break up the monotony of the day towards the end of the day and definitely make them more engaging and interesting? Lastly, is it possible to have a Google Meet extended for 10 to 15 minutes after the flex time or somewhere else during the day for kids' social interaction? Today, when the teacher was booted out of the meeting or something, kids have such a great time chatting, they miss each other, and they need that unsupervised or slightly supervised communication window. From Dina and Foster Elliott. Dear Dr. Murphy, Board of Education, Dr. Miller, Mr. Cooper, Ms. Wolverton, and Mr. Alvarez, and all the staff at Field and Winkleman. Thank you so much for all the time and effort you put into planning both in-person learning and remote learning. The first few days have been a huge success. We can't thank you enough. We are so grateful to all of you. And from Chris and Tara Bozard, thank you. Thank you to the teachers and administration for a great first day. It is really clear how much planning and work the teachers are putting in to make the experience work for the kids and to also give them a sense of normalcy as much as they can. We are probably one of the only families who actually chose both in-person and remote. For in-person, our 8th grader was glad to go to school and that the day felt fairly regular, and her biggest complaint was humorously that she had to walk a few extra steps into PE. Thanks to the 8th grade team for their good communication as well. Also, we weren't sure how logistically you made it work, but wow to the class sizes. As parents, knowing there are around 8 to 10 kids in each of her classes definitely made us feel like she was a bit more safe. Thank you. And for remote, our 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Aaliyah, has been great with the communication and not gone unnoticed. We appreciate that rather than diving into the prescribed schedule, she has gone above and beyond with synchronous time to set the kids up for success and build community with the kids. We know there were glitches and hiccups yesterday, and there are sure to be more to come. And maybe we will all still be remote sooner than later. But for now, thank you for the positive first day and the hard work by administration. So that's the comments.
Okay, thank you. Presentation.
Okay. Is can people hear?
Aaron,
Yes.
sorry, I got a text from someone saying that they can't understand Melissa at all, but they can hear you.
Okay.
So I don't know if they can hear the remote people well, but they can hear you just fine.
Okay. Well, since the next part is my presentation, I could probably let me just accept it. I was told it
All right, let's try that again. Sound check.
Who, me or?
Oh, let's try it out.
Okay. So today's presentation, for the last, 3-4 months, we've talked about what it would look like to open District 31. And we are now in the unique position where we have opened District 31. We are on finished day 2. And we wanted to give an update of where we were and what we're doing. I'm trying to talk really loud, so hopefully people can hear me. They cannot? We're good? Okay. I can move it up. I can go sit closer. Okay. I'm going to talk loud then. So we're going to talk just about what this reopening of District 31. First, I want to do some appreciation and really thank some people. The first, I need to thank the utterly amazing District 31 teachers and staff. They have gone above and beyond each and every moment as we are managing 2 platforms. And it is every single staff member, whether they are in person or remote or doing both, have gone above and beyond. And, I've heard lots of things in the community, but the absolute truth that everyone needs to hear is that our teachers are the most amazing professionals that love and care for students. And even though they were, scared and anxious and nervous to come in, their professionalism and love for kids has come through both remotely and in person. And I thank them, and I thank our teacher assistants, and I thank our custodians for really going above and beyond. We are one of the few that has attempted to open, and they are amazing. And I just wanted to put that out there. I also want to thank my administrative team over there. This was a lot of work. It took more than a summer. I could email something at 11:30 at night, and I would probably get responses from every single person. Not because I expected a response, just because everyone was all hands on deck and working. This team has been amazing in pitching in where whatever is needed. I want to thank the Ed Foundation because they fundraising for extra PPE. Here's an example of some things that teachers got in their bag. It just made, I think, a nice welcoming for teachers, and I thank them for their support. And I thank the PTO. Not only did they provide school supplies for all of our students, which is a huge undertaking, our families did not have to go out to the stores to buy school supplies. It was given by the PTO. Amazing. They also surprised each building with this wonderful sign to greet students and staff when they drove up. It just added a whole sense of being friendly and welcoming, and it was wonderful. And then, of course, normally at this board meeting, you invite new staff to come in and say hi. I'm not doing that. I wasn't going to make them log in and say hi or anything like that. I just want to highlight that District 31 is so thrilled that we have such wonderful, professional, committed staff who jumped in, not only the veterans, but our brand new staff, and we welcome you to the District 31 family. So I just wanted to make sure we said all of that before we started. Our opening of school officially began last week. We had Teacher Institute Day. Normally our Teacher Institute days are 3 days long. This was 5 days long. And we did it remotely and in person, and some people were a little bit of both, but we had 5 days. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a highlight of some of the things the teachers did or worked on during this time. One of the highlights of the week was that teachers got to participate in an in-person time with Dr. Doug Bolton. He did a parent session, but he also did some teacher sessions. He did 2 for Winkleman and 1 for Field, talking about strategies to support social emotional learning through building resilience in school communities. I have gotten emails from teachers saying, bring him back. He was just what we needed to kind of help us work through some of our anxieties and fears, but also how we can support kids and to really understand what kids are doing. We are going to have Doug back, but this was a really important step in working with social emotional awareness with our staff and our families and our students. We also had other sessions such as PPE and infection protection, remote learning virtual training, live streaming, assistant training. Our assistants for the first time did a half a day of training just for assistants. We also had a Teacher Institute Day virtual conference, and there are 2 days of topics from differentiation, distance learning for ELL, fostering community in your classrooms, Padlet and Flipgrid and Nearpod, oh my, providing effective feedback, MTSS, universal design for learning, SEL second step, signs of anxiety, behavioral expectations and procedures, reviewing the handbook, and legal updates. And our teachers, we had 2 different sessions. Teachers could choose 2, but we also recorded all of these, so they are available, and some of these are coming back at one of our later PD because they are important things. What we liked about it is that it was differentiated. Teachers can choose what they needed to be successful for the start of the year. We also have building-based agenda items. I mean, so the teams are not putting their whole agendas, but they have building meetings and team meetings and student service meetings and collaboration and articulations and classroom setup, whether virtual or remote, both of them needed setup time, and social emotional learning. It was a gift to have those 5 days, and I'm not sure how we would have pulled off Monday without having all 5 of those days, so I thank you. So let's talk about the numbers of opening day. What are our numbers? Where do we absolutely fall? We did a registration back in July. There's been some flip-flopping over the last couple of weeks. And some of it, when the handbook came out, people read it and decided we are now, no one can change from this point on. But we wanted, until we do a re-registration. But here are the numbers. At Winkleman, so the way this is structured is for each grade, you can see how many e-school sections, how many in-person sections, and how big they are or small they are at this moment. And the percentage of students e-learning or in-person. So in kindergarten, there are 2 e-school sections, and they are at, so 40% of our students are e-learning in 6th grade, and 60% of our students are in person in 6th grade, or kindergarten, sorry. Kindergarten, I don't know why I'm saying 6th grade, I think I've noticed the 6th. And then you can see it for each grade, 1st grade, 2nd, 3rd. Overall at Winkleman, we have 43% of students in e-school and 57% of students on campus. This is the enrollment report for, this is the Winkleman portion of it that we would put in the enrollment report. Next month, I'll get into the who moved in and who moved out and all of that. That's not finalized. It was more important for us to get our final numbers for in-person versus remote. So you can see our sections. Our cap for any in-person section is 16. We are not at the cap, and that is because it is a safety consideration. Our rooms cannot go beyond that. For field, our total, our e-school is 41%, and our in-school is 59%. They're pretty similar. And I would say field has fluctuated the most. They were like at 65% some percent, and then they went up to like 75% of students wanted to be in person, and then people scaled back, and we're now at this number. Field and Winkleman are pretty comparable then, at 57% and 59% in terms of the enrollment. Our totals then for the district, 58% of our students are being supported on campus, and 42% of our students are enrolled and being supported in our e-learning program. This is not including our pre-K numbers and any students who are enrolled out of District 31. A lot of those programs were still sort of, they're in there. I will incorporate those numbers in September.
No, put those numbers.
What?
You did a label of the numbers that you put. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I'll fix that.
I'm gonna make sure you say what 58% is in person. You put
58% is in person. What happens? Okay, so those are where we are with our numbers. Okay. So then I just want to highlight some opening day successes and just pictures. I have 2 slides of pictures here. You can see the shield we have at lunchtime. You can see our buses. Can I tell you, our buses were pretty much on time? Remember last year when that was our biggest concern with buses? But we have not had that at all. We've had rooms of students. You can see some examples of social distancing, some of the different signage. I love this picture of Mrs. Frandell because she's actually trying to get a thumbs up from all of her students in the remote classroom before she moves on to something in the in-person. So it's really showing that, trying to figure out that duality of that role. I would say each and every one of our teachers has new challenges this year. If you are in person, you are dealing with all the safety and the transitions and how to teach when they can't collaborate in person. If they are an all remote teacher, they are working with those challenges of kids being every place, of technology, of trying to engage kids when they're sitting in multiple different living rooms across the area or their bedrooms and the distractions that come from there and trying to engage students. Some teachers are doing both. They are doing some sections, like at Winkleman, they have some students that are doing asynchronous specials while other students are in person. And at Field, of course, in one classroom, you might have 6 people in person and 10 people at home, and that is your classroom. So I think we want to just highlight the fact when we see this, every teacher is exercising new skills right now and trying to learn new strategies. What I've been so impressed with is the collaboration people have had and the ideas people have shared throughout this. I did this, you can do this, and that really shows, once again, their professionalism and dedication. Some other successes, North Shore Transit. I just mentioned that. They have been clean, on time. They've been able to accommodate us. Right now, I just put this in here, that the total number of paid bus riders, we have 149 students who have paid for the bus. 6 plus 10 that we're still working on. Processed financial aid free bus riders, 67 plus 36 in the pipeline, and 8 that are reduced. I put this in there because when Kathy later talks about bus service, there's sometimes a question of how much revenue are we getting from the bus? We're really getting it from that 149 plus 10 for whatever they paid for the bus. That is our revenue. That is way down. Usually we have about over 400 kids on the bus. Or at least yeah. And so I think it's important, while we are so, and by the way, I cannot say enough about North Shore Transit. Their people have been at our schools in the morning and the afternoon. So we don't have to call and find out about a bus. They are there and organizing it. They've been fabulous. But I just want to highlight, we don't have as many bus riders. And so the district is having to subsidize the cost of these buses at a greater level than ever before. And we have one additional route for both Field and Winkleman in order to accommodate the people who we have 5. We used to have 4 at Field, now we have 5. And now we have 8. Because we can have a limited amount of students on a bus So in order to accommodate them, we had to expand because there can only be 24 on a bus.
I think 100 has 6.
Oh, 6, maybe a little less?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're getting back to the 11.
So,
What's our typical ridership? Typical year?
over 400.
Over 400 sign up for bus, they don't all take it. So usually we have probably, let's say, at least 300, riding the bus on a regular basis. But a lot of times people purchase it just to have the case. So this is lower, but that works for us because we need to get
Quest Food Service. We appreciate their partnership because they have been our partner and they adjust and adapt. They are providing food service delivery to the Winkleman classrooms, which is a very different model than we've had before. We have social distance food service at Field. And we are starting a meal pickup at GBS for families on free or reduced lunch. Because we are still obligated and we want to, but it is part of our job as a school, whether you're in person or remote, to make sure we are providing those food services to families who might need it. So the meal pickup at GBS is still partnering with us. We will also be utilizing First Student to drop off, North Shore Transit. I have to get out of that mode of First Student. North Shore Transit to do a weekly meal drop off utilizing North Shore Transit. Okay. Technology has also been, we're up and running. Have there been glitches? Absolutely. But we are live streaming in our middle school. We've done reverse live streaming where teachers have live streamed into the classroom. Students all have technology. We have web cameras that are working. And even though there are still some, people are still figuring out the best way to do this with the live streaming or do this, that's where the collaboration comes in. It is up and running and we are working. And we also have developed a lot of routines and schedules. So what are some opportunities that we have for improvement? I would say one of our big headaches right now is the consistency of parents self-certifying students. That is something we are required to do. We are using Skyward, so we're hoping people get into that system. What's nice about Skyward is we can run a report and say, okay, these people did it. But at this point, we are calling parents and having to pull students from classrooms in order to get that self-certification done. We are not supposed to self-certify kids. It is the parent's responsibility to do that. So we are working with some of our families who the technology is a challenge. We could do a paper copy if need be that they bring in. I mean, we're willing to work, but we need to have everyone self-certify when they come in. Also need to work on consistency in parents pre-ordering food and milk at Winkleman since it's a different system. They're delivering it, so the kids can't go and order it on site. It has to be delivered. So making sure that those Fridays, that's part of the routine we need to establish. We're going to continue to work on schedules and routines. It's important to us, we've had some requests saying, wow, the first day of school sounded great. I'd love to send my kids in person. Right now, we need to maintain our programs because we're set up. There'll come a point when we do a re-enrollment, but that's been a little bit of a challenge to have those conversations that we're not up to, we can't move from program to program. Technology, as I said, we're still learning our technology. We're still learning. We're glad we weren't on Zoom this week where there was nationwide Zoom outages. And Google is developing the Hangouts and different things have improved. Today there was an email that went out about the best way to show a video through your Hangout. So all these different strategies are being taught and a lot of it is teachers sharing the best way. I heard a lot of last week, hey, let me go into my room and live stream to your room. So we can, where my camera should go and what's the best way to do it. And we're still working through the substitute challenge. That hasn't been a huge issue at this point because we've only been in school 2 days. We are still moving some subs through the pipeline. We're transitioning to Kelly on October 1st. I think we have a meeting tomorrow. We're working on some additional training. And we're trying to figure out what the best way is to have a sub for students who are learning at home. So when do we move to asynchronous? Because the subs don't necessarily have the technology or the skills to run a Google Meet or all the different, or have a computer or any of those things. So there may be some times if our online teachers are absent, that we may have to move more to an asynchronous model. Or if a teacher is absent here at field, doing more asynchronous for everyone involved, because it's very difficult for a sub to manage a live streaming and an in person. So those are some things that the administrative team is going to continue to walk through. And then there's been some questions about, okay, how do we keep schools open then? What are those numbers we need? And back in July, I presented this matrix, and this is where we are. I've added some trend lines in the last week. And then we talked about needing staff attendance rates and sub-fill rates and student attendances, marks to be at a certain point. But of course, this is a living document because the state keeps on giving us new guidance and new updates that we're trying to incorporate and understand into it. So we're adjusting our numbers and kind of, we realize that this has to be more of a living document than an absolute hard and fast in some ways because of some of the guidance the state has given us. For example, we had said we can't fall into region or phase 3 because then we'll be closed if we have an 8% positivity rate. Well, the reality is it doesn't seem like as states have moved back or regions have moved backwards, if that has been the case per se. Currently, this is our positivity rate. I took this morning. We're at about 6 point something, 6.2 maybe. It's been a steady incline, but not a steep one. It's been pretty shallow. If it had gone up the way it was in July, we would have actually been over 8% by now, and it hasn't done that.
What positivity rate is for what area?
For Region 10.
Which includes a lot of.
This is all of it. This is what the state has designated as Region 10. So this is the official matrix. Here is some positivity rates for our 2 zip codes. Over since the 10th up until yesterday. This is 60062. The township superintendent, I think Brian Webley, has been keeping track of this. So you can see what the 7-day positivity rate has been, the daily positivity rate. So there's been some numbers in tracking. And here it is for 60026, because we are part of the 2 zip codes. So you can see our positivity rate in our area isn't as high as our region. But the big question is that official in any way? How does this factor into any decisions? But it's good to know. And then we looked at, okay, what is the state doing as different regions like Will County has moved back, what are they saying? So this is a portion of what they say the mitigation measures are. For example, they say that meetings, social events, and gatherings are limited to lesser of 25 guests or 25% of overall room capacity. I don't know exactly what the impact of the school is, although our room capacities are certainly larger than we're putting kids in. Now, probably what we have is already at the 25% mark, but it's not necessarily 25. So the question is as the state moves regions back, what impact does that have on schools that are opening? And that's not clear right now. And then, of course, last week, the state sent out the Illinois Department of Public Health and ISB sent out this guidance called the Adaptive Pause in Metrics, Interim School Guidance for Local Health Departments. So they're looking at color coding. Blue indicates that the county, so this is interesting because they move away from region in this document and into county. Now, of course, when we look at county, we are Chicago and suburban Cook, whereas our region is just suburban Cook, but other places around the state are multiple counties. So this is where some of this gets confusing. Orange indicates that there are warning signs. And they also give us some definitions of something called an adaptive pause. I just put the whole definition here. Essentially, it's their fancy way of saying, if something doesn't look right, a school district can go into an adaptive pause. I think that's a way of saying not closing, but that we're going to pause in-person instruction to adapt to the changing health conditions. So, at all levels of community transmission, school officials may need an adaptive pause to consult with their local health department to understand community transmission metrics and to plan for how to respond to a given scenario. So that's kind of the new word, is an adaptive pause. I had a meeting with the superintendents. We're like, were we in adaptive pause last spring? Is a school that's not opening? Are they considered in an adaptive pause? But this is the new language. And then here is the metric guidance that the local health department gave to prompt discussion with school officials. I put that sentence on here because that is at the top of this guidance, the metric guidance for local health departments to prompt discussion with local schools. When I read that, it looks to me like the conversations originate with the health department, prompting discussions with the school, not vice versa. But when I ask someone at the Cook County Department of Public Health, he goes, oh no, you would need to talk to us. So this is where we have a lack of clarity. And we also don't know if right now, and I'll show you some metrics with this, I showed you what they currently have on the next slide. We're probably right now in the moderate community transmission because in our county cases, we have about 96, it's like 90 something people per 100,000 people. But remember, that's our county. But if we're in substantial, then we move into tier 1 mitigation, but we don't know exactly what that means for schools. All we know is that this prompts a discussion. So recently, up until a couple of days ago, we couldn't even find the metrics to fill this in. This morning, I found this, which is for Cook County. This is county. Our test positivity, we're at 4.8% as of today. This is our cases reported Sunday through Saturday. There's minimal rise. Our new cases per 100,000 is at 90 cases per 100K. And our youth cases are at 347. So that's the data that I have found to populate this metric. So what does this mean? I think there's a lack of clarity still. Each county health department is developing different responses. So Lake County has one set of responses, and Cook County has another one. And so we have different counties doing different things. The Northfield Township Superintendents have been collaborating on this. We have written a letter to the Cook County Department of Public Health to meet with us because we're like, we need more clarity in understanding this because if we want to use this, because we need to be able to explain it to our community, and I don't know enough to explain it to our community yet. The regional superintendent has asked for the Cook County Department of Public Health to provide clarity via meeting. And when I talked to someone from the Cook County Department of Public Health, well, first of all, this document I think had come out without the Cook County Department of Public Health seeing it first. It was from the Illinois Department of Public Health, so I think they have been lovely in responding. But I think they're playing catch up too, going, okay, we just saw this document with you and we're trying to provide information. They are planning a future webinar. We are told it'll be either at the end of this week or next week to provide clarity on what this means. One of our questions is where do we get this data? Of course, since then, they've now provided this data set. Who makes the calls for an adaptive class? State of Illinois? Local school board? IDPH? The CCDPH? What do we do with this information when we get it? I think that's the question. I talked to someone at the Cook County Department of Public Health and I asked him this question. I said, who makes the call? He goes, well, we like to give a lot of authority to the local school board. I said, but we're not epidemiologists or, what we really would like is if it hits here, if then, if this, then this. And that's not what's provided. It's if this, then have a conversation. So, and then what impact does the local community have on school openings and closings? So I created this dashboard before. And some of that has to be local. I mean, the reality is if I can't staff something, right now we're staffed, so I don't want anyone out there to worry. Our staff has been great. But if I don't have the subs or if too many people are gone, we have to factor that in. But in terms of that big question of how bad does it have to get to close schools or how good does it have to get to reopen? And I would say for other school districts, their question is, what does it have to be for us to reopen? They have the opposite question. This is where we are. I wish I had the answer. I feel like every day there's some additional information. We look at something on one day, and then 2 days later we find that something's been updated, with sometimes not even an email saying something's been updated. So this is where we are at this point in terms of what the state is telling us. So new metrics and a new dashboard for part of this, but still a lot of questions. So what are our next steps? Continue seeking clarity and guidance from the Cook County Department of Public Health. We're continuing our collaboration with the township to determine, is there something we could do township-wide that is consistent in terms of the interpretation, so that way it's not District 30 is opening or closing, but we're interpreting it differently. If it's not based on local conditions, but based on like these matrix, is there a positivity rate? Is there something that we could do, that we could present to our board saying, hey, would you be interested in a consistent metric? Still not there yet. And we're as a cabinet meet at least once a week to review any of this information to say, how are we doing? Or do we have any concerns about staying open? And then this morning there was an email from Regional Superintendent Kevin Jones that he is setting up region meetings with the County Department of Public Health because everyone is asking these same questions. So that's kind of where we are. And then I have the last picture here. This is a wonderful bulletin board at Field that says, don't let COVID mask your excitement for learning. So that seems like an appropriate picture to end with. So that is my presentation on the opening of school.
Okay, thanks, Erin. We have the consent agenda.
Yeah, I just have discussion points on that. In the early part of the presentation, you talked about substitutes and potentially for remote learning challenges.
Yep.
I'd encourage us to look at, especially once we get a pool, or even get a pool, to designate 4 or 5 recurring subs or options in our buildings in a normal year and do our part of it with the technology so that our remote learning section can get a sub.
I think that's one of the possibilities we're looking at. I think it depends on, like, I think it's a little bit more difficult with the live streaming option. So I think we're having some success with live streaming in as well, where there's just a sub in the room to monitor while the teacher is in. That's provided that they aren't so ill that they can't. That it's for, like, they've been quarantined or they're. So I think what we're doing is looking at every option to figure out what best fits the scenario, completely understanding that some subs may not have the capacity for that. So we're just kind of sorting out what our needs are at this point.
Other comments or questions? Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Yeah, I have a motion to approve the open session minutes of the July 16, 2020 regular meeting of the Board of Education, to approve the closed session minutes of the July 16, 2020 regular meeting of the Board of Education, approve the open session minutes of the August 3rd, 2020 special meeting of the Board of Education, approve the closed session minutes of the August 3rd, 2020 special meeting of the Board of Education, to approve warrants for the second half of the month of July in the amount of $131,379.46, to approve warrants for the first half of the month of August in the amount of $177,452.89, to approve payroll for the second half of the month of July in the amount of $94,717.09, to approve payroll for the first half of the month of August in the amount of $115,622.89, approve the personnel report as submitted, to accept donations, and there are none this month, to approve policies, pandemic preparedness, management and recovery, student behavior, student records, use of educational technology, student data, privacy and security, communicable and chronic infectious diseases, home and hospital instruction, attendance and truancy program. And on roll call, Maria? Aye. Jeff?
Aye.
Daphne? Aye. Laura? Aye. Nancy?
Aye.
Melissa? Aye. Okay. Moving on to action items. State roll were saying that, Melissa's still sounding muffled.
So Melissa needs to talk louder, probably.
Okay. I'll try. So,
I'm not shared yet though. Click on that. Yep, now it's there.
Okay,
So really loud.
I will try.
Teacher voice.
Okay. One thing I wanted to point out, in the board packet was the legal budget that is required by ISB to fill out. I did find one error on line 16 on estimated revenues. It was just, CPPRT was entered into the wrong cell. Nothing really changed at all with that. So, this is the tentative budget for 2021, and every year the board is required to adopt a tentative budget, publish a notice, and make it available for public inspection. So once it's approved, it will be on the website and will be available for district office. We'll be holding a public hearing for it on September 24th. And that is available for 30 days, and, I did include the notice in the board packet, so, everyone knew that it was posted. And again, the budget is provided in the format required by the state. So, I would be neglectful if I didn't at least bring up the COVID-19 impact to our budget. So, I just wanted to point out that, in the 19 and 20 school year, we had already spent, about $187,000 for all kinds of different things, training equipment, hotspots, bus refunds. You know, I put a list up here, we're buying Forex machines, electro sprayers, floor decals, sneeze guards, whatever we could do to make this a safe environment, new filters for the air conditioners and furnaces. So, all those things, at that point, we were able to purchase a lot in last year so far. And then this year through mid-August, we've purchased about $82,000 worth of equipment or supplies. Anyway, that does have a little bit of an impact, of course, and, we're just hoping that we're doing everything we can do. It seems to be a current effort. Okay, so in general, tentative budget information, this is just to note a little bit, our revenues, we talked about this before, which is also kind of related to, it is related to the COVID impact as well. Property taxes, we weren't sure how that was going to be affected. What I have seen is, there are a number of taxpayers in our community that have not paid the fall taxes, so some are delinquent, some will be late. So I think for the most part, we should receive the property taxes. If, you know, if something occurs with the household, the bank would have to pay that. But if, hopefully, if nothing else, it's just late tax payments. We do have some refunds that we are working to, try and mitigate or eliminate or something. Some are large, some are many, many small ones. For instance, just yesterday on a tax report that we get from the county, there were already $157,000 of tax refunds that Heritage District. So that really basically just reduces the taxes that we're getting in. So that's an impact. State reimbursements, we are still waiting for some state reimbursements from last year. Usually there's 4. Last year I think we got 2. Then we end up getting 2 the next year. Not sure how that's going to work at this point this year due to all the extra money that's been spent with the state, but they do usually make educational reimbursements a priority. So we're just watching that and, preparing for that. And then, one of the positive things is we had a couple of early retirements, which helped with our, reduce our expenses and provided like a little buffer for the additional staff that we had brought in. So, anything that we could bring in to reduce that effect is helpful. And then obviously for the expenses, we had a lot of consequential expenses that we had to do. We've also had some savings, not that we want to have these types of savings, but we aren't going to have all of our after-school programs. We aren't going to have the sports programs, which is unfortunate, but it helps on the financial piece of it. Things that we don't know yet, and it's estimated in the budget, are the tuition costs that we have for NSSED, what that's going to be for our students. We have to determine the collective bargaining agreement and other salaries. So that is a big chunk of our salaries. And so those are estimates that are in here. So every day, any more information we get is helpful. And then we've had additional staffing costs, materials, equipment, and meal costs. So these are some of the things that have affected this year's tentative budget. Okay, so we're moving to first operating revenues, which is usually what I focus on in the budgets because debt service and capital projects are just that. Debt service is basically a wash. You bring in from property taxes for debt service what your payments are. And capital projects, we don't include because it would skew the numbers so much. And as you know, the last few years, we've done a lot of capital projects. So operating revenues include education fund, operations and maintenance, transportation, and working cash. And then we also, in the budget, include IMRF and Social Security. And again, those should usually have a neutral effect, but we're always playing with the fund balances for those two funds. Okay, so the next slide, these are operating revenues comparing FY20 actual to FY21 tentative. And our sources are, of course, our biggest is property taxes. We have CPPRT, evidence-based funding, other local revenue, and federal programs. So each source between these 2 years right now is within 1% of each other from the previous year. So the allocations have been very consistent. And property taxes right now are reflected at 86%. But there are a number of situations, like I just mentioned, that are developing that will affect this number. And as I said, we're trying to mitigate that. We are in contact with people and we're trying to keep track of that. Evidence-based funding, that is not going to move for us. That's going to stay at the level it was last year. So there is no growth in that resource. And then this slide breaks it down into state, local, and federal resources. And the estimated property taxes right now, they always, when we do a tentative budget, they are always higher than the actual numbers once the year has passed. And a lot has to do with how we levied and allocated the funds and just based on the CPI, and we don't usually include refunds. Tax refunds that we received. So this number will likely change for the final budget, but I am just putting it in as it is right now. The other thing I wanted to point out, if you look at budget 2021 for the corporate personal property replacement tax, it's much lower than we normally have. And for one thing, that may not be paid out as much as it normally is. So I have assumed a 10% reduction in CPPRT. But not only that, CPPRT has become the main source of funding our devices and technology. So you will not see 150,000 of CPPRT because the debt service for the capital leases is not shown in the operating costs. So our number is closer to 400,000, but for the operating costs, that's what we're getting. And then other local revenue is listed as well. Excuse me. In 17-18, we're showing that abatement up on top of the 1.9 million. That was from the 2018 bond allocation, which was allocated to working cash. And just this last year, we did use $1 million of that to abate money into our capital projects. And then the abatement, that abatement is not reflected here because it really went from Fund 70 to Fund 70 expense, which we're looking at revenues, to a Fund 60 revenue, which is a capital fund. And then this slide just shows the same thing we just talked about, just to give you an idea. And you can see how the blue, that is much higher, as I mentioned, that in a budget compared to what actually happens for the year. And again, we will be adjusting for property tax refunds. And another factor making this adjustment necessary is, again, the late or delinquent property tax payments. So we'll just have to work on figuring that out. I had requested a report from the county, and there were about 623 taxpayers in our area that are either late or on hold for payments, which totals about 11 million in tax payments due. But of course, that's spread across the entire area. Okay, other revenues are debt service. So we do get our property taxes to pay that debt service, and that's listed there. And I mentioned CPPRT. And then for our capital projects, I'm estimating about 75,000 on impact fees, and those would come from either the Providence development or the Lexington Homes project on Landwehr and Willow. We did receive one payment from them already, so they are starting to sell their homes. Okay, so for operating expenditures, again, those same funds, and you know, as the cost of business continues to rise, especially during this time, we'll just continue to try and allocate and respond to the needs of the district as best we can. Some of these have some non-recurring expenses excluded because they just would skew the numbers a little bit. But so this year's budget is much higher, and we just have had additional salaries and other costs, health insurance. That was an increase of about 7%. And that's in Fund 10. And we've also had some equipment purchases and a lot of supplies through the O&M fund, so that's higher. Transportation is always on the rise. And so that's where we're landing right now. So these are the estimates again that we did for salaries and transportation. And I just wanted to point out for transportation, special ed transportation, we are to be reimbursed 80% from the state if they are fully funding that initiative. So we do get some of that back. And then the operating expenditures, again, the percentages are pretty much the same between the funds. So again, a consistent pattern. This chart is all funds, capital and operating funds, and this is by object. So it breaks it down into salaries, benefits, purchase services, supplies, capital outlay, other objects, which include our necessity tuition, transfers and non-capitalized expenditures, and termination benefits, which is the retirement schedule. So that leaves us at about 21 million for this year for all expenses. And again, our capital outlay is very low. We are not anticipating any large projects for FY21. This is the same, just a different picture for the same information. And again, our salaries are much higher. Our benefits are slightly higher. Purchase services, that is definitely higher. And other objects has not really been determined yet. We have a meeting with NSSED to figure out that's the biggest part of that cost. to find out where we are for next year. So this chart just gives us an idea, based on this tentative budget, what our fund balances would be at the end of the year if we spent and received everything that we were budgeting for at this time. So the beginning balance at 7/1 was 13,900,000. We're showing a little surplus at the end, including all funds, or we would be ending up at 14 million. Again, I think it will change by the time we do the final budget, but I just wanted to put that out as a guesstimate for right now. And the capital expenditures this is the other side associated with debt service. Our bond payments are 800,000, and then our leases for copiers, printers, and one-to-one devices and laptops is 179,000 for this year. We budgeted for some capital improvements if needed, just $250,000 in improvements, and we always put some contingency in there in case we need that. If we did spend this, our capital projects fund would be at a balance of 189,000 for the end of the year. When you look at the state budget, it is broken down into a budget summary, cash summary, and then the detail behind it. And the last page always gives you the outcome of it. We did not need a deficit reduction plan because it was a balanced budget. The budget summary was fine. The cash transactions were fine. For the limitation of administrative cost worksheet, right now it's sitting at a decline of 6% in costs, and there were no errors on this one. Are there any questions on any of that before I talk a little bit about projections?
Just want to go back to the expenses that are increasing,
Yeah.
specifically the education fund, 1.6 million. What portion of that is salaries? And because there's only 82,000 that we spent on COVID, not including salaries.
Right.
Thus far, I don't know what you anticipate, but a significant increase, so.
And that's because a lot of the things were also, we managed to purchase at the end of last year too, which
Yeah.
was nice.
Well, this slide is that's all funds, but there's only salaries in ed fund and operations and maintenance. We don't have any salaries in any of the other funds. So, and this operations and maintenance salaries are much, much lower than the education fund. So we did hire 5 additional teachers, but it was offset by one is on leave, 2 retired. And those were higher salaries than, when you're at the end of your career, they're higher than when you're coming on.
And some of them weren't new positions. They were positions we hadn't hired in the spring because we weren't sure what was going to happen. So we held off. So they're maybe a different position than what we would have done in a normal year.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so for example, one of our interventionists left. We didn't replace it with an interventionist. We replaced it with a classroom teacher because we were reorganizing. So it wasn't necessarily an extra staff member. It was just a change in how we allocated. That doesn't mean I think we're ending up with at least one more than we had anticipated to start the year, but yeah.
And I don't think we hired them yet, but possibly a couple of additional TAs, which probably also fills spots that we didn't fill the prior year. So that's why there's some increases there.
We would still like, yes, some additional TAs to help with some of the monitoring and some of the support, because more hands on deck are better in this case.
What's the impact I saw there too, that FMLA was increased in there? What's that from more teachers or higher?
So FMLA was increased.
Where did you see that? I'm sorry.
In one of your slides, I just saw like the differentiation. I was just asking like how that happens, that it goes up higher.
I'm not sure where FMLA is in here. Sorry.
Oh, IMRF, sorry.
Oh, I
Right there, yeah. I said FMLA, sorry.
Okay, yeah, that's okay.
I was reading that on somebody's thing here.
Yeah, that's okay. So that's in anticipation of hiring those extra 2.
Oh, okay.
That's the pension system
Yeah,
for the
right.
non-certified staff, so.
Yeah.
And then most of actually all of the IMRF staff know the raises already. We know that was determined.
Mhm.
So that's a pretty set number. as far as that one goes. Did I miss anything? And then I did some projection scenarios. I did not bring the entire document. I just brought a few pages with some assumptions, just so people had an idea of what we're looking at. Pull that up. Okay, so for the projection information, the resources used for this is the agency tax rate report, which we get from the county every year. The latest one we had, which we received in June, was for calendar year 2019. And this is what we talk about when we levy. We have to kind of anticipate where we're going to be in June of the following year. So that's why, we try and overstate what our levy is. We know we're not going to get that much, but we just want to make sure we don't miss something that's coming out 6 months later. It's also, we used the Skyward reports for fiscal year 20, and then the tentative ISB legal budget for 21. And the assumptions made were the FY 21 and 22 salary increases were estimated at 5% for 2 years, and then 3% for the next 4 at the current FTE. So whatever we put in the FY 21 budget for FTE, that's what we used. And again, it includes those additional employees. We also assumed a 6% benefit increase for FY 21 and then 5% moving forward. So this is, IMRF costs, TRS costs, health insurance, life insurance, that type of thing. We did have some potential savings, as we discussed, about $175,000 for some of those retiring, and we'll have that in 22. And a potential savings of over $100,000 for people retiring in 23. We continue to get those receipts from Estellas for their that tax incentive project, the 7B that they have, where their value was set for 13 years. And then at the end of that, we would get the full value of the project. We're assuming 15% increases in transportation costs, which is what was called for in the contract. And then 5% moving forward. We are definitely going to have decreased interest earnings due to the return on the investment rates and the depletion of our funds from the capital projects funds. We're also estimating the CPI to be 1.5%. We use the all urban CPI, which means suburban and urban, and how they spend their money, not rural areas, but it typically over a long period of time averages 2%. We're using 1.5 just because with the lack of spending and what's happened with the economy lately. In July, the change from the prior year was 0.6, so I did make a chart just to show what that looks like. But it is on the rise, and so that's good news for us. And then I used CPI of 2% for FY23 moving forward. And I did do a slight change to our collection rates for the spring receipts are usually 55% from the prior year, and then you get the remainder in the fall. And I usually would estimate it to be 98 or 99% because that's been our history. But this time I'm looking at 97%. I know other districts are taking a bigger number away from that, but I don't want to be too drastic with that without really knowing much about it at this point. And also moving forward, we're looking for ways to reduce costs and we have a possible way to do that with a change in programs. The other thing with our agency tax rate report, we did have a 9.35% reduction in the tax rate. We went from 2.84 to 2.58. And this reflects the corresponding EAB increase that we had of 12.8%. And that was due to new property and the 2019 reassessments. And then in 2018, the tax refund is reflected in 2020. Whoops. And right now, we did not include the potential 2019 property tax refunds in the FY21 information. So this chart, this shows that if we had CPI at 1.5% with the same FTE.
Check. Okay.
Are we good? Okay.
Okay,
Can everyone hear us remotely? Please do.
I'm texting him.
We can do the talk to us, right? You can talk to us, but we say.
That's what she meant.
all right, good.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. So anyway, this shows that, you know, by 2026, we'll be hitting our minimum fund balance. And of course, that shows that space of time, we have an opportunity to adjust. And again, this year is a higher level year than we're anticipating moving forward. For the most part, of course, we have a lot of unknowns out there right now. This is if we did 2.5% salary increases for 2 years and kept to 1.5%. So it shows just, you know, how that little bit can make a significant difference. And then this is if we had 0.6% CPI for 1 year, 1.5 for the second year, and 2% moving forward, with 5% increases for 2 years. So they're basically just to give you an idea of the trend for the expenses that we are working with. Does anyone have any questions on that?
What happens when you do below the fund balance?
Well, that's our policy. I mean, that's at 35%. We're supposed to be 35%, and we are above 35%. So we would be making changes before that time and adjustments anyway. But, you know, it's just important to kind of get an idea of what that means and, you know, what we need to keep in mind. And again, this year is going to be a more expensive year, so that trend would stop a little anyway. But again, like I said, there's still some big unknowns that we have to work through. So,
Yeah, the trend's no longer up, but did I read that right, that since 2017, we are on a downward trend, meaning fund balance is declining year over year?
yes.
Expect that to continue in the budget that you put together.
Yes, which I'm hoping that this one year is not as bad as the, coming years, but again, we don't, we have to make those decisions, so.
So you're projecting within 6 years, probably hitting that mark where we're living below where we want our fund balance to be if we continue.
Right. Yes, so,
Having understood that this is even.
right. Yeah, and again, it's at 35%, it's not at zero. But again, you have to mitigate any changes to that, so. So, with all that said, and thank you for your patience, I'm, asking for the board to approve the tentative budget tonight.
And then the final budget will be presented at a hearing in September, and any changes and updates that Kathy will highlight from the differences between the tentative and the final. And it feels like all the time we're getting new information about this year.
Yes, every day is changing, which makes it a little difficult, but we try and tackle most of it in the tentative when we can, so there's not as much to change in the final budget. But whatever changes there are, we'll bring them to you in September.
Okay,
And yeah,
so may I have a motion to adopt the tentative 2020-2021 budget?
So moved.
Second, on a roll call, Maria,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Daphne. Aye. Laura. Aye. Nancy.
aye.
And aye. So it passes unanimously. On to our next action item, to approve the memorandum of understanding with Quest Food Services.
So, let's see. Do we need to pull that out?
I don't think, I mean, the memo was attached for everyone to see.
Okay.
It's just, so I think we're good.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions?
No, so moved.
Is there a question?
Total cost of 10,000.
Oh, no, no, that's just the monthly management fee.
Right?
So we're also going to be having to pay for, the meals that are going
The
on.
normal bill, but that's,
Like the free.
The free and reduced
Right.
ones that we don't
Exactly.
normally pay. Those are usually, the ones that we're doing, we don't normally, during a typical school year, that's usually assumed more by Quest. But because we're having to bring them to people's homes, then we are adopting that cost because it's a greater expense for them. This is not what was originally in the contract, correct?
Right, and I would say that every year, they do not experience any type of profit from our district, but they're usually pretty break even. But they want to partner with us, with the high school and surrounding areas, and so they have been great about helping us and being flexible. But it's very hard to move forward. It's kind of like what we went through last year. If we were going to stay with First Student and needed their drivers on time, we would have to pay, just like for our special ed tuition not tuition, transportation costs. We had to continue paying those because that was the contract and we're still in that contract.
So in other words, if we want to ensure that we have a food service partner this whole year, whether we're in person or out of person, and one that can support our remote students as needed and our in-person, they can't afford to partner with us unless we're willing to help them break even. So any amount, if they're not looking to make a profit on us at all, there is no profit margin. And in fact, if our food sales result in a profit, they're going to share that back with us. But this is their way of saying if we close or anything, they can still manage, they can still partner with us. If we don't do this, then we don't have a food service program. So that's what this is.
And I mean, there is a clause in there for, you know, to give 30 days notice if needed for termination, but we do need a program in place and, they're accommodating us, and they include us with their operations at the high school, and our bus service will deliver to those who cannot come and pick it up.
So they have been really flexible and, you know, they have been a good partner with us and we would like to get through this year with them so we can move forward. So I guess that's where the.
Okay, so I believe we had a motion and a second. Am I correct?
Yeah.
No.
All right. Okay. Maria,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Daphne. Aye. Laura,
Aye.
Nancy.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, it is approved unanimously. Next action item, approve additional cleaning costs for bus service with North Shore Transit. Any questions or comments? It's in the packet.
Yeah, I just have one comment. I spoke with the vice president there, and the cost is no longer 28,000 for the year, but 21,000. So I just wanted to make a note of that. And that's if we're here every day.
Okay. May I have a motion to approve?
Move.
Second.
Roll call. Bob,
Aye.
Maria,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Daphne. Aye. Laura,
Aye.
Nancy.
Aye.
All right. And now to our next action item, to approve the policy for school board meeting procedures.
We were, last meeting, I was asked to pull this one out so we can just, change or discuss, a certain aspect of it, which was when a board member makes a request to have something on the agenda, is there anything that defines when that request, would be honored? The policy right now says items submitted by board members to the superintendent or the president shall be placed on the agenda for an upcoming meeting. Press alternative language that they offer in the footnotes was any board member may submit suggested agenda items to the board president for his or her consideration. So a little bit less specific. Another possible alternative, we could have items submitted by board members to the superintendent or the president shall be placed on the agenda for an upcoming meeting at the earliest convenience, but not later than 3 board meetings hence. I kind of just chose those numbers to be reasonable, trying to figure it out. We did ask other boards, and most of them looked, I mean, were like, it really has never been an issue, so they use more the press adopted language because it's never come up as a concern. So I guess this board needs to decide which language they want on here, and when you adopt the policy, it would be the press policy with, and then read the statement that you would want.
Aaron,
Yeah.
does IASB have recommended language? I'm curious.
This press is IASB, this comes from press, or press comes from the Illinois Association of School Board. So this is their language, the press suggested language. And the alternative comes from them too.
Anyone have a preference? So we currently have the suggested language.
I like the third alternative option that says no later than 3 board meetings hence. That's what my preference would be.
I concur with that.
I agree.
I agree.
Laura or Bob, any preference? I'm fine with that too.
On the alternative, I'm fine with it, but I'm a little bit, 3 board meetings seems to be kind of way in the distance. I prefer something like maybe 2 board meetings.
Fine with me as well.
I do want to just, not in particular for this board, but because we are setting policy for future boards that may not include any of us, years out. I have seen other boards, and I know that it may seem like we have some quote unquote drama, but honestly, our drama is light if you watch other board meetings. I have seen other boards where you will have a disruptive board member that will bring up personal agenda. This has not happened on our board, but will bring up personal agenda topics, things like, I don't know, lunch provider, or, just things that are not necessarily board worthy. And when you adopt a policy like this, we set up a future board to not be able to manage that. So usually what I have seen on other boards in my work here is that it can be placed on the agenda, but it does need some level of like a motion. So you need a majority of the president can put it on with agreement, but beyond that, you need some sort of board vote so that you can control for someone that's disruptive, right? So, and again, I'm not talking about our board, but if we adopt board policy, that becomes the policy for people way beyond us. So I just wonder, can it be something like, yes, within whatever meetings you want, pending a board, I don't know what the language would be or what ISB would recommend, but some sort of board vote that it go on a board.
Board consensus conclusion?
Yeah, I hadn't considered that, and I think some of this came up because of probably personal stuff going on the board, and I think you raised. I hadn't considered that, Laura. I think
again, I think anything any of our board members bring up, I have yet to see any of our board members bring up anything that is inappropriate or not. So again, it is not about us seven, but I do think we need to think about, I have seen instances on other boards where you have someone that's just really disruptive. They have an agenda that is outside of a typical school board, and it can be really disruptive. So you want a way for the majority of the board to manage that.
Or
just in terms of governance.
I was thinking something similar in that regard because, and I was thinking through my head, what are the right ways around that? And maybe it's, there's an exception to the policy, and that is if all other board members, so the other 6, determine that that topic is not appropriate, then it doesn't make it on. I don't know if I'd want to go, pure majority, because if 3 board members want something on the board agenda, that what we're saying is, to change it. But I think you're absolutely right. You could have a disruptive board member or a particular topic that she or he is interested in, and they bring it up all the time. So I would be willing to, exception.
Or Jeff, a super majority maybe, so that it has to be that board member plus at least one other. That, it cannot be a solo crazy person. Again, this is not about our board. But it cannot be one person, but the person needs to get a second, is how I've seen it. So you would say, I'd like this second. But before you get to that, if the president approves it, it just goes on an agenda. We don't have to do that for every agenda item, but it becomes sort of, if the president denies it, then I don't know. I just think we need to make sure we set up future boards for success, however we do that.
I would agree.
So what do we want the language to be? Someone have a suggestion?
In terms of time, can we maybe just draft the language and bring it?
I can draft the language and bring it for approval at the next board meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
And then the policy, school board meeting.
That was the policy that was related to this memo.
Right, that's right. Well, this is this was more about the voting method and everything.
Yeah,
So,
we wanted to change that language. So now I'll bring this one back at the next meeting with a proposed change.
that's right. Okay. All right. So information and discussion items, administrative reports, the equity audit update.
Yep, so I just wanted to do some brief updates for people. We had talked about the equity audit this summer. This is a summary of the equity audit. What we've done, we've already had our phase 1 is complete because we had our organizational meeting. We selected our questions. We did our planning. We have PD planned for staff and parents around this issue for the first part of this year. This does not mean that there won't be something in the spring, but right now our team has only gotten as far as November in our planning for things right now. The actual audit will be held in October, at the last week in October. We will have 30 focus groups, and I put the information in there, including translation for some of them. For 3 of them, so we can make sure we include more of our families. And once the focus groups are done, once the data is analyzed, we will get a report in the fall or spring. So I just wanted to provide just an update to the community and to you about where we were in that process, and I will continue to update you, and stay tuned for different information.
Okay, thank you. And the parent education series update.
Yeah, I'm just excited. I think this is the first time in our history in the last 13 years we actually have parent education series. We have a fall series. We had our first one with Doug Bolton. It was actually remote, but we had more parents at that one than I've seen in any parent education that we have done over the last couple of years. We will definitely have him back. He was talking about resilience and building resilience during a pandemic. I know I took away a lot of different nuggets. Our second one will be about Equity 101. So introducing that same language that we're introducing to our staff and to our whole community. And then we're going to do one on technology in October by our admin team. And then we are planning to do a second series in the winter. And we have some topics that we're already planning. I just want to highlight the fact that we're really trying to reach out to parents and provide education. And we have found that parents like virtual programming. And they also like that it can be recorded. I get lots of requests for the recording of it. So we seem to be tapping into a system that if we're looking at some positives of what's going on, we probably would have been tentative to ever do something like this. But parents like virtual. So we'll continue with that. So I just wanted to highlight that. And we're excited to have a series. In fact, we're looking at 2 different series this year. fall and winter. And then my third report, I went back in my notes. I started creating a calendar of all the things that we need to include in a year. And one thing we had for the beginning of the year was to review safety drills and updates. So I provided a memo to everyone on our safety drills and updates where we are. We still have to have an annual safety meeting. That's usually in September. It might be October this year, depending on as we get things up and running. Gave you some information about our calendar for annual drills, and also how it'll be modified due to COVID-19. We are still going to have the required drills. We're still going to meet requirements, but we're going to do things differently. For example, for fire drills, we are not going to have the whole school filter through a single doorway and evacuate into the field. We might do a grade level or an area and practice it. So there'll be modifications for everything. And we are still on stay tuned. We haven't done any of them yet, but we will.
One comment as I look at that, as you and the team meet, I'd consider whether or not we need to add another fire drill and or active shooter drill immediately following the winter break. Should the enrollment numbers shift significantly, right? 40% of your students are not going to get that in the fall.
I think that's an excellent point.
Should a significant portion come back, we need to figure out a way to make sure that they get that again.
Absolutely. We will add that note. Principals, add that note. Okay, those are my updates. I'm finding probably that's putting the memo out there so you can read means that they can be a little bit shorter. Kathy.
I will be very brief with the monthly summary. It's the first month of the fiscal year. For the treasurer's report, our fund balance is sitting at 17.1 million. 16 of that is invested at this time. The amount we are expecting for interest income through the end of November is $9,000. So you can see the significant difference in what we've been earning in interest. And the rate of return is at 0.33%. We did receive some July and August property taxes, and a higher than normal level of CPPRT. My understanding is they might be paying it all upfront and not as much throughout the year. But the property taxes, as you could see from the monthly budget report, are lower than what we've received last year at this time, and I believe it's all from what we just talked about. So, and that hits all funds across the board when you look at the revenues. And in expenses, we are definitely spending more in O&M right now due to everything that we need for the buildings. And I did want to point out the expenses for the ed fund were higher last year, but last year at this time we had a early retirement payout, so that contributed to why it was higher than normal. And as far as the chart goes, our expenses are pretty much in line with last year percentage-wise, and again, our revenues reflected them lower. P-card? Oh, yeah, so nothing with the P-card, just let me know if you have questions. Facilities update, there's not much to talk about. We're still looking at the field here at Field, trying to see what we could do to make it a little better. We're doing some landscaping here and there for the outside of Field, and we'll probably have to reseed it at Winkleman again in the fall. And the last thing I wanted to say was they did get the street done in time before the start of school, which I did not think was going to happen. But they did change that, so there's no more left turn lane to go into the parking lot as you're driving south.
The turn lane to nowhere is gone.
Yeah, to nowhere is gone. And I did ask the traffic directors to send 2 out here for the first couple of weeks at Field, just in case people aren't used to that. So we'll have 2 for a couple of weeks, and then we'll go back to the 1 traffic director. And there's 1 at Winkleman as well, so they're scheduled to. But other than that, I don't have any other facility updates.
We're on board reports then.
So Melissa had to step away. So sorry, I was muted. Melissa had no board presidents. Daphne Frank, Glenview Plan Commission. Any updates?
No updates.
Nothing from EdRed. Nancy, PTC Foundation.
Yep, I got a little bit for PTO and Ed Foundation. So the PTO has been very active in a couple of weeks leading up to the first day of school. School spirit posters were designed and handed out with technology and materials to pick up at both schools. Spiritware was also sold at Field when 6th graders came for materials. Welcome back lawn signs were installed at both schools. By all accounts, a big hit.
They're lovely.
Lovely. The first general meeting for the PTO will be Monday, the 14th of September at 7 p.m. via Zoom. And since the memberships are waived for 2021 year, everyone is a member and everyone is invited to join the meeting to hear about the coming year and learn how to get involved. As far as Ed Foundation, they're working with administration to provide up to $5,000 of PPE supplies. They received income donations of face masks, homemade and purchased, and hand sanitizers to be used in the district. And they've received over $2,000 in donation as of this morning. And the next foundation meeting is scheduled for September the 22nd at 7:30. And they will offer an in-person and remote options. Visit the foundation website for more information. That's it. Thank you.
Great. Bob, Northbrook Economic Development Committee.
There was nothing. This past month.
Jeff, Stakeholder Financial Advisory.
No meeting.
Maria, ASC.
Except the Triple I conference was canceled. So the Triple I conference was canceled this year, or will be canceled.
And Aaron, do you want to mention
Aaron,
the
Um,
one that was on July, August, that Monday?
There was a NSSCD meeting. It was an emergency sudden meeting because they wanted to talk reopening plans and adopt some policies. Once essentially we just adopted.
And there's one tomorrow that I will be attending.
And we do want to have that discussion. And NSSCD, by the way, is in remote until after Labor Day, and then they're moving more to a hybrid model with the hope of getting more and more people in on kind of a gradual program, or they're following where their school districts are if they're a program within a school district. So they're a little bit blended. We would love for people to consider being the permanent NSSCD rep from the board. Personally, this might be a good year to do it because at least at the beginning of the year, the meetings are remote because they have more people than can fit in a room who are at those meetings. The next one is this week. There's not any in September. The next one is, then they tend to be the first Wednesday in October, first Wednesday of the month after this one. Nothing in September, and then the first Wednesday of the month. Any volunteers? Or we'll just keep on asking per month.
I'm just gonna make a suggestion. We look at, bringing on a new, maybe we should talk about, reorganizing ourselves a little bit better, in more meaningful committee work. So that things are a little more equitable and we can all take on a chunk of the pie, and that's the problem here. And NSSCD is very time consuming. And all of these other things really aren't, let's all be honest. Some a little more than others, but if we could maybe think about a way we can be more effective and more supportive to the district. I think that goes beyond this conversation today, but just something to think about. But I'm fine piecemealing NSSCD until we get to that point and figure out a better plan. That's just my suggestion.
Now, one thing that will is I am the township rep for the superintendent, so I will so at least I will be at all the meetings so I can bring that common thread because that is one of my responsibilities this year as part of our township-wide superintendents. So that will provide some of that consistency in terms of what everyone's talking about. Does anyone? I will send out the dates, and you guys can let me know who's going to claim which one.
Okay. Aaron, you skipped over student enrollment, though?
Student enrollment, I did it within the board. I did it in my presentation.
Okay, so we're good. No FOIA. So I guess that's it. We're ready to move into closed, unless...
Jeff had an addition at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay, go ahead.
It may make it challenging without Melissa, but I was curious to know where we are at with the board self-eval scheduling since our last conversation at the July meeting.
I think Aaron can give that update, I think, Aaron, right? Because you've been trying to get the rep.
I was getting the rep. Now, I know there was some discussion about who the rep would be. Our only option is Dee Molinera from the Illinois Association of School Boards. So we had talked about doing an alternative person. That person is not going to be available for us. I have not, part of it is I will admit that I've been swamped, that wasn't my top priority. I will admit that was on the bottom of my to-do list right now as compared to opening up schools. I'm not sure if am I still asking her for dates to do this? Is that the consensus we have? Because that's where I wasn't sure at the last meeting, because there were some talks about should we do it in open session and should there be some other training before we do that? So I want to know what I'm asking her for, because I don't want to keep on asking her for dates, because that's not putting us, we're not representing ourselves really well. to do that. So I guess that's the direction. I mean, I can continue, I can get another set of dates from her, send out a doodle and get the dates. But I just want to make sure that's where we all are as a board.
Does it have to be live, Erin? Does everybody have to be at the meeting?
She requires all 7 board members to participate. There has to be a commitment by all 7 board members. I think it can be remote, it can be done this way, the way we're doing it right now.
So it can be, some can be together and some remote?
Yeah, it just needs to have the voices of all 7 board members.
And is there a way that you can just ask, are those same dates still available, the ones that you sent us?
It has been a month. I need to go back and re-ask her because I know she released the dates.
Yeah. I'm just saying maybe that's one place to start too.
So I can definitely go ask her if that's the consensus of where we are.
I think, what is the cost investment for this for us?
I don't even know if there is a cost. I think it's part of our membership. I mean, I'd have to go check, but I really that this is included in, because we pay fees every year to the Illinois Association of School Boards. So I don't think there's a cost, but I can check that.
So we have an available person, we have to check on her dates.
I just have, I can email her tomorrow or tonight and she'll send me some dates.
Okay, and she's willing to run the meeting if some of us are remote and some of us are in person.
Just has to have all 7.
Just wants all 7. Okay, so.
And me.
Are we okay?
Are we okay with the person? Is everyone okay with that person?
I don't know the person, I trust the ISD
yeah,
that'll give us some, but, I mean, will we have full board participation if we schedule this? It's probably the ultimate question, and if not, we have to come up with alternatives.
We don't have Melissa, maybe just start another, maybe we just have to do another email to say.
We've been talking about this for months. We really cannot need to push. I mean, Laura, I guess I'll ask you. You did share your concerns at the last meeting in July. If Dee was a facilitator, would you participate?
I'm not hearing that I have a choice, right? So I think it's a fair request. I think it is good governance to do an eval. My questions are around, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and the reason I asked for cost is I would prefer us to use that focus in spring when the new board is seated to talk about how to operate more efficiently, because we're looking at, it's going to take more than one meeting. To Maria's point a couple meetings ago, I think it's going to be a series of meetings. And having been through a couple of reorganizations, one in a very functional board, one in a dysfunctional board, one in in our board, I've seen sort of the kaleidoscope of different possible iterations of board members and different dedication levels, education levels, rigorous levels. And I will say that during transitions, it's not necessarily the best time to invest. I'd prefer we get it on the books for right after we reorganize. But again, I agree. I think you've been bringing it up for a long time. And there isn't, what I have asked for, I think will be much more effective given the reasons. But we've been talking about this for a long time. So at this point, I think we just need to get it scheduled. But I do think it probably would be best to do it in open, given the fact that I'm not so sure, given the issues that we have had. I don't know. I mean, I guess I see that it's been asked for a long time. But I don't know that there's a whole lot that we need to talk about in closed that the community shouldn't hear. So.
I would agree with the idea of waiting until we have the new board seated, because it's coming up in April anyways. And to do this now, only to have to do it again later with a new board, I think is a lot of time and energy that could be spent on other things. And I do think that the new board will need to be involved in this as well.
I feel that we have so much full year ahead of us. I just think that if we could, I think it's just a good learning, it's good exercise for all of us to have now to be stronger this year as a group. That's just my thoughts.
I prefer to not wait 8 months.
Huh?
I prefer to not wait.
Yeah.
It would
I
be,
agree.
it'd be time. And I think, to Laura, your point, Maria's point last time, this will be a series of conversations. We probably should have been doing it every time the board reconstitutes, and we haven't. This may be our first chance to do so. And, we could do it now and then potentially in the summer when things are usually calmer, post board reconstitution would be my recommendation.
What do you got?
We were told all along the evaluation should be something that is closed, with being overseen by his being facilitated. I'm fine with proceeding along the work of effort to schedule one session with the facilitator.
And you want it closed?
I prefer that it's enclosed because that's what we typically are to do with the board evaluation.
I will just say my request for a facilitator that is knowledgeable, and I'm so tired of this topic because it's every month, and I was hoping not to beat this drum this month. So I think a lot of the things that accelerated this request existed in fall, way before we got into crisis or anything happened, right? Like this request has been on the table for a long time. What accelerated the request was a lot of the conversations around diversity and inclusion. There are clearly really, really variant levels of education around this topic on our board. And so the reason I requested that the person be a person who had that knowledge is because before we can have a conversation around what is appropriate, what is not, all those sorts of things, there needs to be that understanding, right? Because often when we say something makes me uncomfortable, it's because of another whole line of thinking versus what is actually good practice. And you see this, I've seen this across dozens of boards that I've sat on. And that was the request. And so if we cannot have it, what happens when you have these things enclosed is a lot of the governance stuff ends up morphing into discussion about what makes us comfortable. And so I'd be happy to have it enclosed if we had someone that is knowledgeable around these topics, which have caused us so much pain as a board. If it's not, then it should be an open, because I do think often a lot of commentary that folks make in private, they are not as comfortable making in open. And I think if it just changes the dynamic of a conversation to be, I think, a lot more positive, right? People tend to be a lot more willing to be positive versus sort of negative. That was my request for a facilitator that knew how to deal with these issues, because that's a big part of our, we can talk about buses and fees and a lot of things. Where this board is challenged is talking about those topics. And so that's why my request was for someone that had that knowledge. Because I would trust someone with that knowledge to do this in closed. Otherwise, I think it needs to be in open.
Erin, is this person not knowledgeable when she's talking?
Well, she is our field service rep. She is skilled in working with boards. I do know she is part of the equity initiative for the Illinois Association of School Board, along with several of her other colleagues. I have not really worked with her other than superintendent's training a year ago. So each region has their own field service representative who is the one who is supposed to guide the board through their questions and their training.
I just want to jump in and say, I understand what everybody is saying. I'm not disagreeing with anybody, but I'm also willing to bet that if I were to ask all 7 of us, what is our goal for this meeting that we're trying to set up? I think we would all say different things. And so for me, what's important is to at least just have this meeting, if nothing else, to put on the table what we need to work on as a board. I don't care if that's an open, I mean, our community can probably tell us right now what we need to work on, right? I don't care.
Exactly.
I mean, that doesn't matter to me. I prefer it being closed for reasons of us prioritizing as a group what we feel is important, but that for me is the goal of this first meeting. And the evaluation of board practices, I think, comes through a series of meetings. So for me, I have no hesitation in setting up a meeting. I don't care if it's open or closed. I'll go with whatever people are more comfortable with, but let's just have that meeting and have someone facilitate that to help us pave some goals and a path for, a series of meetings to get us all in a more functional place. That's what I would hope for.
Let's start with getting some dates and see what's available.
Okay, and I will also ask the Illinois Association of School Boards if they're willing to do it in open session or closed too. I mean, I just don't know if what their protocols are and what their agenda items are that align with certain things. So I will find that out, hopefully by Friday.
And maybe when you get the dates, do like a doodle and see.
I will the doodle.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I will send that out as soon as I get the dates, hopefully by Friday.
Thank you.
Okay.
So is there anything else before we move to close?
I think that's it.
So hang on, we discussed on SLCD briefly, but we're just to do it ad hoc. We're not going to do a month at a time like we've done in years past.
I think I said I would send out the list and people can claim the list.
Gotcha. So
Yeah.
And I'm covering tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Anything else? Okay, can I have a motion to move into close to consider pending litigation and collective bargaining? Or I got to adjourn first, right?
No, you do that first, and then yeah. So move.
Second.
Okay, on a roll. Daphne,
Aye.
Laura, Maria,
Aye.
Jess,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Bob.
Aye.
So that's it, right? Aye, Laura. Melissa's not here.
So we are now going into closed, and just for people listening, there are no action items when we come back into open session. We will just be doing an adjourning. So just wanted to let people know that.
Thank you.
So we can really turn off the live stream.
Just so we're expecting more people. 5 minutes, 10:03 or something, 9:03. What do we want to?
Let's say 9:05. I already said, yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
So I say congratulations to